Dad perfect events. At the family dinner, my son-in-law Tyler looked me straight in the eye and said, "Your generation built with hammers, Harold. We build the future." I set down my fork and replied calmly, "Well, let's see how your future looks when your funding disappears." My daughter Patricia froze. What funding? Tyler's company is self-funded. That's when they finally learned the shocking truth about who'd been bankrolling their tech empire all along. My name is Harold Peterson. I'm 62 years old, retired construction company owner, living in Phoenix, Arizona. Spent 35 years building Peterson Construction from a one-man operation with a beat-up Ford pickup to a company employing 40 people. Sold it 3 years ago for $8.2 million and figured I'd enjoy my golden years watching my grandkids grow up and maybe doing some woodworking. Always believed if you take care of family, they'll take care of you. Turns out I was better at reading blueprints than reading people. My daughter Patricia used to be different. I remember when she was 8, running to show me every drawing she made, every little accomplishment. "Look what I did, Daddy," she'd say, eyes shining with pride. She'd sit in my office while I worked on estimates, asking a million questions about why we needed permits and how concrete worked. That little girl grew up, got her marketing degree from ASU, married Tyler Morrison 8 years ago, and somewhere along the way, started looking at me like I was some relic from the past. Tyler, my son-in-law, is a whole different breed. 34 years old, calls himself a tech entrepreneur and startup founder. Drives a Tesla Model S, lives in a modern house in North Scottsdale with smart everything. Lights, locks, even a smart toilet that probably costs more than my first truck. The guy talks constantly about disruption, scalability, and exponential growth. He's got this permanent smirk that says he knows something you don't. His parents, Stanley and Barbara Morrison, are cut from the same cloth. Stanley spent 30 years in pharmaceutical sales before retiring, and Barbara was a nurse supervisor. Nice enough people, but they treat Tyler like he invented the internet. Every family gathering turns into a celebration of their son's vision and innovative thinking. Here's what none of them knew. I'd been funding Tyler's entire operation for 8 years. Every month, $25,000 transferred from my account to a shell investment company I'd set up with my lawyer, then funneled to his startup as venture capital funding. Total investment over 8 years, $2.4 million of my money, all structured through legal channels to look like legitimate Silicon Valley backing. The whole arrangement started back in 2016 when Tyler came to me with his revolutionary business idea. He was 26 then, fresh out of his MBA program, full of energy and buzzwords. His concept was some kind of productivity app for businesses. Honestly, I never fully grasped what TechFlow Innovations was supposed to do, but Tyler was passionate about it. "I need seed funding," he'd explained, sitting in my living room with a laptop full of charts and projections. "The problem is, I want this to look professional, not like family money, you know? Real investors, real credibility." I understood what he was getting at. There's a stigma attached to family funding, like you couldn't make it on your own merit. So I offered to help, but through proper business channels. Eugene Martinez, the lawyer who had handled my company's sale, set up an investment LLC, Desert Ventures Capital. On paper, it looked like a legitimate investment firm. In reality, it was just me writing checks. The plan was simple. I'd provide the capital Tyler needed to get his company off the ground, but he'd think it came from professional investors who believed in his vision. I wanted to see if my daughter would still respect her old man when she thought he was just another successful contractor who'd done well for himself, but didn't understand the new economy. Looking back, maybe I was testing them. Maybe I wanted to know if they'd still value family relationships when they thought the money was coming from somewhere else. Either way, I got my answer, and it wasn't what I'd hoped for. Tyler's company, TechFlow Innovations, rented office space in one of those trendy co-working buildings in Tempe. Glass walls, ping-pong tables, a kitchen stocked with energy drinks and craft beer. Tyler hired 3 employees initially, 2 developers and a marketing coordinator. Every month, my $25,000 covered salaries, rent, equipment, marketing expenses, and Tyler's own generous salary as CEO. The irony was perfect. There I was funding his lifestyle while he talked down to me about being old school and not understanding modern business. Patricia would brag to her friends about Tyler's success, how he was changing the world with technology, how his investors recognized his potential. His investors? That was me, the guy they thought didn't get it. Family dinners became exercises in patience. Tyler would dominate conversations with updates about user acquisition, burn rates, and runway extensions. Patricia hung on every word like he was delivering profound wisdom. Stanley and Barbara beamed with pride, asking intelligent questions that made them sound like they understood venture capital. Meanwhile, I sat there writing mental checks, knowing that every success Tyler described was bought and paid for with my money. The fancy office, mine. The talented development team, mine. The marketing campaigns that were generating incredible engagement metrics, all mine. But I kept writing the checks because I love my daughter, and seeing her happy meant everything to me, even if that happiness was built on a foundation she couldn't see. The warning signs started showing up around year 5. Helen Rodriguez, the private investigator I'd worked with, back when I had employee theft issues at the construction company, had been doing quarterly reports on Tyler's operation. Just basic due diligence, I told myself, making sure my investment was being handled properly. The reports painted an interesting picture. TechFlow Innovations had grown to 8 employees, but their actual product development was moving slower than molasses. The app they'd been working on for 4 years had maybe 300 active users. Most concerning, Tyler had started using company credit cards for personal expenses. Dinners at expensive restaurants, weekend trips to Sedona, even car payments on the Tesla. But I kept quiet and kept paying. Every month, $25,000 disappeared from my account and reappeared in Tyler's world as validation of his brilliance. My silence was bought and paid for by my own money, which seems ridiculous when I think about it now. The shift in how Tyler treated me became more obvious as his confidence grew. At family gatherings, he'd interrupt my stories to correct my outdated thinking about business. When I mentioned problems with what he used to solve in construction, he'd wave his hand dismissively and explain how digital solutions made those problems irrelevant. "That's the thing about your generation, Harold," he said at Patricia's birthday party last year. "You think in terms of physical limitations. We think in terms of infinite scalability." Patricia laughed and squeezed his arm. "Tyler's taught me so much about thinking bigger." Stanley Morrison raised his beer in a toast to thinking bigger and breaking barriers. I raised my water glass and smiled, thinking about the $1.8 million I'd invested by that point in Tyler's barrier-breaking operation. The final straw came this past March. Patricia had insisted on dinner at Copper Creek, one of those farm-to-table places where a chicken breast costs $45 and comes with 3 baby vegetables arranged like art. Tyler spent the entire meal holding court about his latest breakthrough, something involving blockchain integration with their workflow platform. The beauty of distributed ledger technology, Tyler explained to the table, is that it eliminates trust as a limiting factor in business relationships. Barbara Morrison nodded thoughtfully. "It sounds revolutionary." "It is," Tyler continued, warming to his subject. "My investors understand that we're not just building an app. We're building the infrastructure for how business will work in the future." I took a sip of water, staying calm. Throughout dinner, Tyler had been dropping hints about his company's upcoming Series B funding round, how major Silicon Valley firms were circling, how he was going to have to choose between competing offers. "Dad," Patricia said, turning to me during a brief pause in Tyler's monologue, "Tyler's been trying to explain blockchain to me. You should listen to this. It might help you understand modern business better." That stung more than it should have. My own daughter suggesting I needed help understanding business when I'd built a company from nothing and sold it for enough to fund her husband's fantasies indefinitely. Tyler leaned back in his chair, that familiar smirk spreading across his face. "It's probably too complex for someone from your generation, Harold. No offense, but construction and technology are completely different worlds." "Try me," I said quietly. For the next 10 minutes, Tyler launched into his speech about cryptocurrency, NFTs, distributed ledgers, and how TechFlow was pioneering enterprise workflow optimization through decentralized verification protocols. Half of it sounded like buzzwords he'd memorized from TechCrunch articles. But Patricia hung on every word like he was delivering the Sermon on the Mount. "The thing is," Tyler continued, getting more animated with each sentence, "my investors get it. They understand vision. They're not stuck thinking about business the old way, with physical products and traditional metrics. He gestured broadly, nearly knocking over his wine glass. They think in terms of exponential growth, not linear progress. They know that to disrupt entire industries, you have to be willing to operate outside conventional wisdom. Stanley nodded enthusiastically. Tyler's always seen around corners. Even as a kid, he understood things differently. Patricia beamed at her husband. The stories Tyler tells about his investor meetings are incredible. These people are funding the future. I set down my water glass carefully, feeling something cold settle in my chest. These investors of yours must be pretty generous. Extremely, Tyler said without hesitation. They're not just throwing money at random startups. They're strategic partners who understand that true innovation requires patient capital and long-term thinking. He leaned forward slightly, his voice taking on a more serious tone. They've seen my vision from day one. They know I'm not just building another productivity app. I'm creating a platform that could fundamentally change how businesses operate. The table was hanging on his every word. Even the server, refilling our water glasses, seemed to be listening. Your generation built with hammers, Harold, Tyler said, looking directly at me. We build the future. You had to work with your hands, deal with physical limitations, worry about materials and labor costs. We work with pure ideas and unlimited scalability. The restaurant seemed to go quiet around us. I could hear my own heartbeat. Is that right? I asked softly. It's just reality, Tyler continued, emboldened by the attention and the wine. Look at where traditional construction got you. A nice house, sure, good retirement, but nothing that changed the world. Meanwhile, I'm building something that could affect how millions of people work every day. Patricia shifted slightly in her seat, but didn't say anything to defend me. If anything, she looked mildly embarrassed that her old-fashioned father might not understand her innovative husband's explanations. You'll never understand real innovation like my investors do, Tyler added, his voice carrying that condescending tone I'd grown to hate. They think in terms of exponential growth, market disruption, scalable solutions. It's a completely different mindset from building houses one at a time. That's when something inside me snapped. Not anger exactly, but a cold, clear certainty that this conversation was over. I'd spent 8 years funding this kid's delusions while he talked down to me, like I was some relic who didn't understand the modern world. I stood up slowly, every eye at the table turning to me. The restaurant continued buzzing around us, but our little corner felt frozen in time. You know what, Tyler? You're absolutely right. Your investors should be the ones supporting you. His smirk widened slightly, thinking he'd won some kind of argument. So, starting tomorrow, that's exactly what's going to happen. I looked directly at him, then at Patricia. Let your brilliant investors carry the load. I'm done helping. The smirk faltered for just a second. Patricia's face went white. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Tyler doesn't need your help. His company is venture funded by major Silicon Valley firms. The words hit me like a physical blow. 8 years of secretly supporting them, $2.4 million of my money, and this was the thanks I got. My own daughter looking at me like I was delusional for suggesting I'd ever helped. I pulled out my wallet and dropped $80 on the table for my portion of the meal we'd barely touched. Enjoy your dinner. Dad, wait, Patricia started, but I was already walking away, my heart pounding with a mixture of anger, betrayal, and something that felt surprisingly like relief. Behind me, I heard Tyler's voice. What the hell was that about? Stanley Morrison's confused murmur. Maybe he's having some kind of episode? Their laughter followed me out to the parking lot. The drive home felt different somehow. Every stoplight gave me time to think about what came next, and by the time I pulled into my driveway, I knew exactly what I had to do. First call was to Eugene Martinez. Even at 9 p.m., my lawyer answered on the second ring. Eugene, I want to terminate the investment in TechFlow Innovations. Effective immediately. Are you sure, Harold? That's a significant position to unwind. What happened? I told him about the dinner, about Tyler's speech, about my daughter's reaction. Eugene listened without comment until I finished. 30 days notice as per the original agreement, he said. I'll draft the termination letter tonight. Are you prepared for the fallout? I've been preparing for 8 years. Second call was to Helen Rodriguez. Helen had been documenting Tyler's operation for me quarterly, but now I needed something more comprehensive. Helen, I need a complete forensic audit of TechFlow Innovations. Everything legal and above board, but I want to know exactly how they've been spending money down to the last penny. Business? Dispute or personal interest? She asked. Personal. Very personal. And Helen, I need this yesterday. I'll start tomorrow morning. How deep do you want me to go? Deep enough to find out if my son-in-law has been using company funds for personal expenses. Deep enough to document everything for potential SEC filing. Over the next 2 weeks, the pieces started falling into place like a construction project with a solid foundation. Eugene prepared the legal documentation for investment withdrawal, everything by the book and completely legitimate. Helen's investigation revealed what I'd suspected but hadn't wanted to face. Tyler had been treating the company like his personal piggy bank. The forensic accounting showed $180,000 in questionable expenses over the past 3 years. Tesla payments charged to transportation. Family vacations listed as business development trips. Expensive dinners categorized as client entertainment with no client records. Even their house down payment had somehow been funneled through the company as a housing allowance for key personnel. But the most damaging discovery was the employment records. TechFlow Innovations officially had 8 employees, but Helen's surveillance showed only 3 people actually worked there regularly. Tyler was paying salaries to 5 ghost employees and pocketing the difference. This is textbook embezzlement, Helen explained during our meeting at a coffee shop near my house. He's been systematically defrauding the investment. You'd have grounds for criminal charges if you wanted to pursue them. I studied the photographs she'd taken. Tyler arriving at the office around 11 a.m., leaving by 3 p.m. most days, long lunches at expensive restaurants, afternoons spent at golf courses while he was supposedly in investor meetings. What about the app they've been developing? Helen pulled out her laptop and showed me TechFlow's actual user statistics. 347 active users as of last week. Revenue from subscriptions, $1,200 monthly. They're burning through $25,000 monthly to generate $1,200 in actual income. The math was brutally simple. Tyler's company was losing money at a rate that would make a casino blush. How long until they run out of cash flow once you stop funding? Helen asked. According to their current burn rate, about 60 days. The first sign of trouble came when Tyler called me directly, which never happened. I was in my workshop, sanding a piece of walnut for a jewelry box I was making for Dorothy, when my phone rang. Harold, I need to ask you something weird. Tyler's voice sounded tense. You don't know anyone in venture capital, do you? We just got notice that one of our major investors is pulling out, and the timing couldn't be worse. I set down my sandpaper and smiled for the first time in weeks. Can't help you there, Tyler. I don't understand modern business, remember? Right, of course. I just thought maybe through your construction contacts or something. This investor is claiming some kind of compliance issue, but our lawyers can't figure out what they're talking about. Sounds complicated. Have you talked to Stanley about it? Maybe he has some connections from his pharmaceutical days. Dad doesn't have that kind of money. We're talking about a $25,000 monthly commitment that just evaporated overnight. I almost laughed out loud. That is a lot of money. Good luck figuring it out. 2 weeks later, Patricia called, sounding panicked for the first time in years. Dad, something's really wrong with Tyler's company. Multiple investors are pulling out, and he doesn't understand why. The office lease is up for renewal next month, and they might not have the cash flow to cover it. That's unfortunate, sweetheart. These things happen in business, but Tyler's been so successful. His investors believed in his vision. How can they just abandon him like this? For the first time in 8 years, I heard doubt in my daughter's voice. The crack in her confidence that I'd been waiting for, without realizing it. Maybe you should ask Tyler to explain exactly who these investors were, I suggested gently. What do you mean? I mean, maybe it's time for complete honesty about where the money was really coming from. The breaking point came in late June. Tyler's company officially folded. The office lease expired, equipment got repossessed, and suddenly my son-in-law went from tech visionary to unemployed. 3 real employees got laid off, which bothered me more than Tyler's downfall. Those people had families, bills to pay, and they'd been working for a company built on lies. That's when I decided it was time for complete transparency. No more games, no more hints. The whole family needed to understand exactly what had happened and why. I invited everyone for dinner at my house, Patricia, Tyler, Stanley, Barbara, even little Dorothy and Leonard. I'd spent the afternoon preparing not just the meal, but a presentation that would lay out 8 years of deception in terms nobody could misunderstand. I want to show everyone something important, I said after we'd finished eating. I'd set up my laptop in the living room, connected to the big screen TV I rarely used. Tyler looked confused but interested. Patricia was frowning, probably wondering why her father was suddenly interested in technology. Stanley and Barbara exchanged glances, clearly expecting some kind of family slideshow. This is about venture capital and how investment really works, I explained, pulling up the first slide. It showed the corporate structure of Desert Ventures Capital, the shell company Eugene had created 8 years ago. This is the company that funded TechFlow Innovations for the past 8 years. Invested $25,000 monthly for 96 months. Total investment, $2.4 million. Tyler's face went pale. How do you know about Desert Ventures? I clicked to the next slide, which showed the ownership structure, the bank routing numbers, the authorized signatures. Because I am Desert Ventures, Tyler. Every dollar that funded your company, your salary, your office, your employees, it all came from me. The room went dead silent. Even Dorothy stopped playing with her toy and looked up, sensing the tension. The construction guy who doesn't understand modern business. The guy from the hammer and nails generation? I've been your entire venture capital firm for 8 years. Patricia's hand went to her mouth. That's not possible. I pulled out the thick folder I'd prepared, the same kind I used to keep the construction contracts organized. Bank statements going back 96 months. Wire transfer confirmations for every single payment. Legal documents establishing Desert Ventures Capital. All notarized, all filed properly with the state. Tyler was staring at the laptop screen like it might explode. His mouth was opening and closing, but no words were coming out. Why? Patricia whispered, tears starting to form in her eyes. Because I wanted to see if you'd still love your old man when you thought he was unsuccessful, when you thought he didn't understand the modern world. I looked at both of them. I got my answer at that dinner in March. Stanley Morrison, who'd been silent this whole time, finally found his voice. You mean Tyler's success was funded by the guy he called outdated and irrelevant, the guy who supposedly didn't understand exponential thinking or scalable solutions. I clicked to the next slide, which Helen Rodriguez had prepared. It showed Tyler's personal expenses charged to the company over the past 3 years, the Tesla payments, the family vacations, even restaurant meals that had nothing to do with business. Here's what your son did with my money, Stanley. Your brilliant entrepreneur used business investment funds for personal expenses. In most states, that's called embezzlement. Tyler shot up from the couch like he'd been electrocuted. You can't prove that. Actually, I can. I pulled out Helen's complete forensic report. Helen Rodriguez, my investigator, documented everything. Credit card statements, GPS tracking on the company car that somehow ended up at personal destinations 60% of the time. Payroll records for employees who don't exist. Patricia was crying openly now. Dad, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. No, you didn't know. But you were quick enough to dismiss me when Tyler explained why my generation was obsolete. Barbara Morrison looked like she'd been slapped. Tyler, is this true? Did you really use business money for personal things? Tyler's face had gone from pale to red. This is insane, Harold. You're destroying my career over some dinner conversation where I got a little carried away. I'm not destroying anything, Tyler. I simply stopped building it for you. I closed the laptop and looked around the room at the shocked faces. The SEC was very interested when I filed my report about TechFlow's financial irregularities. Turns out they take investor fraud seriously, even when the investor is family. Stanley leaned forward, his voice strained. What does that mean exactly? It means Tyler's going to have to explain to federal investigators why he paid himself a $180,000 salary from a company that never generated more than $15,000 in annual revenue. It means he'll need to account for every dollar of company money he spent on personal expenses. Patricia looked between her husband and her father like she was watching a tennis match. Tyler, tell me Dad's lying. Tell me you didn't do those things. Tyler's mouth opened and closed several times before he finally spoke. The lines between business and personal expenses get blurry in startups. Everyone does it. It's not illegal if you're the founder. Actually, it is illegal when you're spending investor money, I said calmly. Eugene Martinez, my attorney, made sure I understood all the legal implications before I filed the SEC report. That night, after everyone left in various states of shock and anger, I sat in my workshop among the hand tools I'd collected. Over 40 years, real tools that built real things, not virtual promises of future disruption. My phone buzzed constantly with texts from Patricia, apologies mixed with accusations mixed with confusion. Tyler had apparently spent the evening ranting about how I'd sabotaged his company and destroyed his future in tech. But here's the thing about building something real, whether it's a house or a business or a relationship. It has to have a solid foundation. Tyler's empire was built on my foundation, and when I removed it, everything collapsed because there was nothing actually supporting it. 6 months later, Tyler was working at a tech support job for a local computer repair company, making $45,000 a year instead of the $180,000 he'd been paying himself at TechFlow. Patricia had enrolled in a certification program to become a project manager, determined to build her own career instead of riding her husband's coattails. They'd sold the Scottsdale house and moved to a modest apartment in Tempe, traded the Tesla for a used Honda Civic. Dorothy and Leonard seemed to adapt to the changes better than their parents, mostly just happy that Mom and Dad weren't stressed about mysterious business problems anymore. The kids started spending weekends with me regularly. Dorothy loved helping in my workshop, learning to sand wood and measure twice before cutting. Leonard was fascinated by my tool collection, especially the vintage hand planes that had belonged to my father. "Grandpa," Dorothy asked one Saturday while we worked on a birdhouse together, "why was Daddy so sad when his computer company went away?" "Because he thought the company made him important," I explained, showing her how to hold the sandpaper properly. "But the most important things can't be taken away." "Like what?" "Like family, like knowing how to work with your hands, like being honest about who you are." She considered this seriously, the way 6-year-olds do when they're trying to understand grown-up. "Problems. Is that why you taught Daddy a lesson?" "Smart kid. Something like that, sweetheart. Sometimes people need to learn things the hard way before they appreciate what they already have.